Covering conditional functions here, in particular sumifs, average ifs, and countifs, and as we're using the file up here named sumifs, countifs, average ifs file 1. First, before we start working through the formulas, let's look at the basic layout for these three items, these three functions. So both sumifs, average ifs are very similar. First you have the range to sum or the range to average. And then following that you have a criteria range. You can have multiple criteria ranges and criteria in terms of the conditional summing, for example. So looking over here for a second, so in a minute we'll look at what are the dollar amount of sales shipped to Oregon. So we'll sum actually if the state is Oregon. Sum if the state is Oregon. Alright, and you can have multiple criteria, which we'll look at. Count is a little bit different. Notice you just have your criteria ranges and the criteria. So it'll count the number of basically rows, if you're doing everything in rows that meet that criteria. Alright, in terms of a count. Okay, alright, so let's get started here. Imagine that you're part owner, I should say, of a budding e-business that sells office products. And to the right, starting over here in column K, we have sales for the third quarter, and there's quite a number of them, a little over 1,800. Notice that one of your partners, who is a bit eccentric, has a number of questions about the quarter, and some of his questions might be a little odd, so we have to bear with him. So let's first look at the data over here before we start doing the formulas. So here we have the date, the state, product, and amount in these four columns here. And not really part of this assignment, but particularly when you're looking at data for the first time and trying to get a general feel for what's included in it, the data filter is kind of convenient to look at. So again, not really a part of this assignment, but we'll do the filter here. Alright, and you guys are probably familiar with the filter. So here we can look and see, well, what states are there. Going to thumb through and might even pick up on if there's any misspellings of anything. So if we saw, for example, Maine twice, with one with and without the E, we know we got a little mistake we need to correct. And for products, similarly, we can view the individual products very easily. And lastly, on the amount, we might look to see if there's any odd entries here, any blanks or anything that's not a number. Everything looks okay there. Again, we're not going to be really using the data filter, so I'll go ahead and get rid of that. Alright, so let's start here. First question: what is the dollar amount of sales that were shipped to Oregon? Use an Excel conditional function. So we're looking at the dollar amount of sales or total sales, so we're going to use that sum, aren't we? And we're going to do equal sum ifs. Okay, and notice it's coming up and telling us, okay, here is the setup. We first indicate the range to sum and then the criteria, in this case being Oregon. So let's hit a little FX so we can see a little bit better. Alright, sum range. I'll go over here. Okay, and we've got quite a little area here to highlight. So a quick way to do this is hold down once you click on the first cell, hold down your shift key and hit end and then down. Okay, again, held down the shift key, hit end and down. Okay, now the criteria range is the state. So we can start here at the bottom, hold down the shift key and the up key. Okay, I want to not include the state. Now you need to make sure that see, we started at N5 and there for the range, and criteria range needs to match it in terms of the dimensions. And the criteria, Oregon, and I need to actually put that in quotes. Doesn't matter about capitalization actually. Didn't make sure I have double quotes, however. So notice I put in, if I just typed in Oregon by itself, I'm not getting any hits there on my, am I? See the zero there? But I actually need to do it in double quotes. Double quotes. Okay, so it's telling us that right away that our answer is $6,004.95. Click on OK, and we're done with that. All right. So again, that's the Sumifs with a single criteria. Let's do the number of orders as well. Number 2 here equals count ifs, and we'll select the fx. And notice in this case, there's not it doesn't say a range to count. It's actually going to count the number of, basically the number of records that match your criteria if you've got multiple ones. And here we're doing, going back and look at the question here, how many orders were shipped to Oregon? How many orders were shipped to Oregon? Let's go back over here. We'll just do the state. Okay. Hold down the shift and down arrow. All right. And again, the criteria is Oregon. And again, whether it's not as capitalized doesn't matter. So there were 40 orders that were sent to Oregon during that quarter. Right? Let's do average, and then we'll cut this one off right here. What's the average order for printer ink? Equal average ifs, and notice there is a average if, but we're going to use the ifs. Okay, so what's the range that we're averaging? That's the dollar amount. And let's do the little FX thing here so we can see a little better. So there's the average range, okay, and the criteria range in this case is the product. All right, and again, just making sure that the dimensions are the same. So both of them start at row 5 and go through 1838. The criteria for this question is what, printer ink, correct? Let's go back up and be sure. That's right. Printer ink. Okay, and again, use double quotes. Now it does need, while the capitalization is not important, but otherwise it needs to match. So if I were to, I've got 155 here, but notice if I were to put in an extra space, okay, doesn't give me anything. Probably would give me an error actually in this case, since it's doing an average. Or if I for some reason misspelled it, left out the E there on the printer. Okay, so it does need to match exactly. All right, unless we use some wildcard characters, which I'll talk about a little bit later. All right, so it looks like our average is 155, 37, or 38. All right, and there we are. Okay, so right now we've just done the single criteria. We'll do some multiple criteria a little bit later with this.